Okay, welcome. It's lovely to see so many for this special climate emergency scrutiny panel meeting to discuss the call-in that is on the agenda. That's essentially the only item on the agenda. So I'll just run through the process just in case anyone's a bit confused as to what exactly is going on. So we have 6 speakers, who are these lovely people here in front of me, and they'll come and speak. Where will they speak?
They're going to stay where they are.
You're going to stay there, okay? No problem. And after that, there will be a sort of process, and the process is that Robin, who's that handsome gentleman over there, is going to speak for 10 minutes on the call-in, and the call-in is a 5-point document which is in the agenda, and then Manda will respond. And then they will both get the opportunities to speak. Manda gets 10 minutes, and then she gets 5 minutes to close, and also Robin gets 5 minutes to close as well. And then the panel will debate, and then a decision will be made. Now, it's important to understand that the process is about the Southlands TRO. That's what's been called in. The debate and the discussion will be about that 5-point document inclusively. So essentially, there are other issues which might be relevant, but I will close people down if I think that they are speaking well off the subject that is under discussion. I think that's all I want to say at this stage. I hope that's clear. The outcome of the debate will be somebody from the panel will move a decision, and the decision will either be to go for a dismissal. Somebody will propose that, or one of the others will propose it, and it will be seconded, and there'll be a vote. So there are 3 options, but really there are only 2. To dismiss the call-in is the first option. The second option is to refer the decision back to the decision maker, in this case is Manda, for further consideration. And the third one is to refer it to council. This one's very unlikely because it implies that we can't make a decision here. So I'm sure we can make a decision here, so I don't see why that third one will be even on the agenda. So that's the situation. I think we are ready now to move on to the meeting itself. So the first thing we have to do, as we always do, is have the emergency evacuation procedure.
When the continuous alarm bell sounds, you must evacuate the building by one of the designated exits and proceed to the named assembly point. The designated exits are signposted. Arrangements are in place for the safe evacuation of disabled people.
Okay, good. And now we move on to item 3, which is the apologies for absence and substitutions.
Apologies from Councillor Michael Orton, who has been substituted by Councillor Fiona Gawley, and apologies from Councillor Grant Johnson.
Okay, thank you. Declarations of interest. Does anybody on the panel live in Southland or something like that? So, which would possibly mean that it's a bit of information we should know. If there are no declarations of interest, I'll move on. Okay, good. I do not have any urgent business. I could argue this whole meeting is an urgent business, I don't know. But I don't have any items of urgent business, so we then move on to item 6. And item 6 is items from the public and for councillors. You have 3 minutes each, and we have a traffic light system. It goes yellow after 2 minutes, is it?
Yeah, orange when you've got 2 minutes left, I think. Then it goes red for the 3rd minute.
Yeah, so 2 minutes, and it goes orange. 1 minute goes red. If it goes red, bring your items to a cease, to a conclusion. Okay? Right, now I've got names here. So the first one I have is Mike Earl. So, okay?
Thank you. Good morning. I spoke at the 11th of January meeting regarding the lack of public disclosure of data collected by Baines for the 3 LN trials. Today I would like to expand on that. In September and October of 2023, the residents of Southlands were asked to complete a survey regarding their experience of the trial. I asked the LN department if the environmental and traffic data collected during the trial would be made public for that survey. I was informed it would not be released and was told, and I quote, "The thesis behind this is that we want the survey responses to reflect the residents' perception of the trial using their own lived experience over 6 months, instead of responses based off of data." I apologise for the grammar, it's not mine. The respondents therefore provided their lived experience collected during 315 days of the trial from November 2022 to the start date of the residents' survey without knowledge of the data collected by Baines. 57% of the respondents concluded they were against the trial being made permanent. The in-trial traffic surveys were based on 2 data collection periods of 7 days, one in April 2023 and the other in October 2023. A third 7-day period in October 2023 was discarded, I believe, as data collection was described as faulty. The trial reports published 12th of January stated, and I quote, "Drawing on survey analysis, it is noted that amongst the reasons for not supporting the scheme was the perception that the trial was displacing traffic and congestion elsewhere. However, the traffic monitoring data shows that the introduction of restrictions had reduced through traffic on Southlands without significant increase in traffic on alternative routes. An attempt was therefore made by Baines to invalidate the residents' lived experience by stating the traffic data collected did not support the residents' views. I asked the panel, which is more likely to reflect the reality of the trial, 315 days of residents' lived experience, or 14 days of traffic survey inside the trial period? This gaslighting of residents' views is deceptive and unacceptable. The report of the 3 LN trials were published the day after this panel's meeting on 11th of January. The panel at the time was not due to meet again until the 21st of March. It is not just the public that are being denied timely access to the trial reports and data, but also this scrutiny panel.
Thank you for your comments. I think I'll allow Manda to respond in her 10 minutes to the questions you raised at the time. 10 minutes. With respect, sir, you don't have any right to make any comments at this stage. These are not our rules. These are rules that are standard orders. These are rules that are standing orders across the whole of the council, not by this administration, but by previous ones before. So that's just the way it is. If you don't like it, sir, I suggest that you write to the. Right. Okay. Thank you. Any factual questions?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your statement. Do you live on Southlands?
No, I don't. No, I don't live on Southlands. My interest is purely in the democratic process within Bath, which I consider to be flawed and obstructive.
Thank you. Have you sort of sound quite obviously unhappy about the result of when you requested a data trial. Have you asked for it at any previous times and been refused it?
Yes, I've been refused data on several occasions, but the latest I would bring to the panel's attention is when the call-in was issued, I attempted to get traffic data, in-trial traffic data, raw data, so that I could have a look at what actually happened within the 2 7-day periods and possibly the third, as it was described as faulty. The pre-trial traffic data, raw data, was actually published on Bain's website for months. So that is still there and it's available for public scrutiny. I was told I couldn't have the raw data for the in-trial traffic surveys, and that if I wanted them, I would have to submit an FOI. Obviously, I think you're probably all aware that FOIs take an extremely long time within Bain's to get replies. And so the time allowed between the call-in and this meeting didn't allow me to submit an FOI, so I didn't bother. I was referred simply to the summary reports that have been published by Bain's. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more? Yes, June?
Do you know why a third data 7-day report was deemed faulty and therefore the results were discarded? I have to be honest, I think 14 days. Yes. Oh, it's your question, sorry. Yeah. That's it.
No, the summary report merely mentions that third report, which I think was, from memory, the 3rd of October to the 9th of October 2023, was faulty. No reason was given.
Okay, thank you, Mike. You raised some very interesting points. Okay, moving on to Angie Paddock. Okay. Ready?
Good morning, panel. My name is Angie Paddock, and I've been a resident of Southlands for almost 12 years. The report E3506 states residents had expressed high levels of support for vehicle restrictions. In fact, this is not true. There has never been high levels of support for this from residents of Southlands. It was a small group of individuals who decided to produce a report and then proceed to hand it to the council. They did not represent this community. They've never communicated to residents what they were doing and why. Some residents were invited to the consultations, but not all. In fact, a lot of residents from Western High Street and Southlands did not know of the consultation meetings. Only those that the planters would impact the greatest were notified of the consultation. During the consultation, concerns were raised and written on feedback forms, which were then ignored, including issues of safety, turning point too small, HGVs and emergency vehicles all unable to turn around. We now have large vehicles having to reverse down Southlands onto Penn Hill Road, or they try and use the small utility road to leave Southlands. The planters were not put in place on the date stated on the ETRO. In fact, it was several days later, and it was not made known to the community of the new date. It was actually going to be installed. So no warning, no signage, no yellow lines. The data collection is flawed. The 3 weeks of the data collection were quiet for Southlands. Taxis, delivery vehicles doing multiple drops are not using Southlands as a through route. They are there with a purpose. Some only take a few minutes to make a delivery. Taxis there to pick up or drop off residents or visitors. And again, they may only take a few minutes. Again, these are not drive-through vehicles. I've driven onto Southlands to my home to drop something off and then leave again. I'm not using Southlands as a through route. I'm a resident. So the figure for drive-through is flawed. There are a lot more pedestrians using Southlands than what was recorded. There are 2 other entrances from Southlands onto Western High Street, which the cameras did not record. Most residents already walked down to the village. Once the cameras were up, we had a group of cyclists on Southlands, but please be aware that they had not been on Southlands prior to those cameras going up, and once the cameras were taken down, those cyclists have not returned. We do not have 21 cyclists per day on Southlands at all. We never had until those cameras went up. The data collection for cycling is flawed. Both surveys were conducted by the Council, showed 71% and 57% were against the planters in Southlands. This has been ignored by this Council. The concerns have been ignored. There is more congestion on Penn Hill Road, Anchor Road and on Western High Street, and also more vehicles on Southlands driving round. This LTM project has been very poorly handled by the Council. Not only has it divided this community, it has decimated this community, which has resulted in creating a two-tier community. Forcing this LTN onto Southlands is not democratic. Thank you.
Thank you, Angie. Are there any factual questions for Angie?
Thank you, Angie. Why do you say that the 3 weeks of data collection were quiet for Southlands? What was or not happening during that time?
Those 3 weeks. Right. Those 3 separate weeks, the RUH have events throughout the year. But those 3 weeks, only one event was recorded per week at the RUH. And in fact, they have up to 9 or 10 events at the RUH per month. And if you look at the other weeks, you're talking 3 or 4 events per week. But those 3 weeks that the Council chose for the data collection only showed one event happening at the RUH.
Oh. And may I do it, or somebody else, and then I'll come back?
Thank you for your statement. How have your ward councillors supported you and other local residents to have your voices heard? How have your local ward councillors supported you and other local residents to have your voices heard?
Okay. We've had one ward councillor support us in having our voices heard. Has actually listened, which is really what we are trying to get across to the Council. We don't feel that residents are being listened to, and our ward councillor has stepped up and has said that he's listening, and which is for us is the main thing, that we are listened to. Thank you.
June?
Thank you. You say that once the cameras were up, groups of cyclists came along, which had not been the case prior to the cameras going up, and then when the cameras were taken down, the cyclists didn't seem to come along anymore, or certainly not in those numbers. Do you have any reasons or thoughts about why this has happened?
Yes, I believe the cycling group were contacted and told the cameras were up, and they came along. There was a nice big group of them. I know this for a fact because they drive right past my house. Once the cameras were down, I have not seen them. I'm a full-time carer. I'm home all the time. My house faces Southlands High Street, so I see who comes and goes. We do get, the parents in the morning, maybe 3, 4, riding to school with the children and in the afternoons, but that is about it. We do not have 21 cyclists a day riding on Southlands. We never have. Thank you.
And one more, if I may?
Yes.
Has the aim of this scheme, and I quote, to create a safer, healthier environment for those that live on Southlands and encourage more walking, cycling and playing outside, have they been achieved?
Not for our side of Southlands, no. No. We've always had children playing out on Southlands since 1980, and there's never been an issue with children playing outside on the road safely. We do have the rec behind us and we do have the big green, but this has now caused, we have more vehicles reversing down Southlands. We did have issues with emergency vehicles. We've also have issues with, the community in itself now has been brought to its knees, because one side, it works really well, but the other side, it does not. And you've created a two-tier situation within the community. So no, it has not worked for us.
Okay, I've got 2 questions. Can you, just for my benefit, I've been there, I've looked at it in some detail, but I'm not sure which side you are. So, okay, that's fine. And the other question is, you talked about RUH events. Can you describe to me what an RUH event is, and why do you think that there were so few during that period?
Okay, so the RUH is a teaching hospital. So they will hold meetings, conferences, they also hold charity events there as well. So the RUH events, there is a social media post that they put up. You can go look back over the years. It breaks it down by month, and it will show you the dates of the events. So those 3 weeks that were picked, there was only one event going on that week, and you're talking 9 or 10 events per month. So, okay.
Okay, I think we're ready to move on to the third person, which is Meg Caine, please.
Good morning. My name is Meg. My husband and I have recently moved to 128 Southlands, which, if you're unfamiliar with the road, is the house in between the planters. Firstly, I want to acknowledge the very real problems with parking faced on both sides of the planters, and ask that we get parking permits that I do believe will alleviate these pressures. But with that out of the way, I mostly want to talk about my support for the LTN, which was in fact something that drew us to Southlands as an attractive place to buy a house. This LTN, like others nationwide, has proven to give numerous benefits to us as local residents. However, it's not just the reduced pollution and lower noise levels that I want to talk about. It's not only the safer streets for children and increased play opportunities, nor is it the opening up of public realm and community event space, though that is lovely. It's not only the social interactions I see happening from my desk, I also work from home, as people stop and chat between the planters. Neither is it the safer and attractive route for cyclists, who I frequently watch carrying both children and cargo right past our door. It's not just the environmental benefits from reduced through traffic or the health benefits from a more active lifestyle, nor even is it the total transformation of a road for cars into a street for people, at a very minor inconvenience, if any, to the residents. The primary issue at stake for me is transport justice. Not everyone will be able to afford or have means to drive their own personal car. And in fact, ONS data reveals that 1 in 5 households in the area have no car, and only 32% have 2 or more. Every time policies prioritise cars over people, it puts the demands of the vocal, privileged few over the needs of the many. Strategies like this low-traffic neighbourhood that promote, enable and encourage active and public transport help to break down mobility inequalities, leading to a more equal society that benefits everyone. Furthermore, the fewer cars that are on the road, one of which is ours, free up the roads for the people who really do need to use them. The elderly, those with mobility impairments, those with small children, or for anyone moving house like us, those shifting large objects. The Southlands LTN is a small part of a much bigger picture, creating a healthier, flourishing and more equitable society, and I sincerely hope it will stay. In spite of the divisions that this issue has caused, my husband and I have had a wonderful welcome to Southlands. Everyone we've met has been so kind and welcoming. We couldn't be happier that we've made it our home. And I know that with the passion and enthusiasm of our neighbours, Southlands will continue to grow into a community that cares for each other and thrives within the city.
Very good timing, well done.
Welcome.
Okay, are there any questions? Ian?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your statement. The previous speaker mentioned that there's a feeling in Southlands that one side the experiment seems to be working, but on the other it's not. Do you think there could be, it could garner more support if it was retained, but there could be some other interventions such as introduction of residents' parking zone, better signage, maybe doing some physical improvements to the turning area, for example?
Yes, absolutely. And I think parking is a problem on either side. One side faces more pressure from the school, the other from the RUH. School is obviously only for a couple of hours a day, the RUH is more sustained. I'm absolutely certain that residents' parking permits, that's not only going to reduce the people trying to come onto the road to park, because they'll learn pretty quickly that they can't park there if they haven't got a permit. So that's going to mean there are fewer cars parked on the road, also fewer people turning around, fewer people getting confused. Yes, I absolutely believe that's possible.
Thank you for your statement. My question is similar to Councillor Hansel's. I was going to ask, do you think the outcome of the endpoint survey would have been different if the parking issues would have been resolved before or during the trial?
That's a good question. I'd like to say yes. I haven't been consulted on this yet because we moved after the consultation period had ended. And so I don't know is the honest answer. But I definitely, I can see the problems with parking and driving. That is very real. I had been to Southlands before the LTN, but I wasn't a resident, so my experiences from then are different. But thank you to everyone behind, very helpful comments. Wow, that's quite something, isn't it? Yes, the problems with traffic are real. I struggle to believe that they are worse now. I think they are different. And I definitely think that with parking permits, better signage, perhaps more designated turning areas, those issues can be alleviated. Thank you.
People in the gallery, please do not make comments to the speakers. I think you don't give yourselves very much respect. These people have come up to speak. They have the right to speak. I've got one question for you, if you don't mind. The previous speaker talked about a sort of cyclist cabal as they only came along when the cameras were there. Now, you have said in your statement that you work and you often look. Do you think the figure of 21 cyclists per day is a reasonable one?
It seems reasonable to me. I have to say I didn't spend the whole day looking out the window, although it's very interesting people watching. But yes, that seems very, very reasonable to me, very likely. I often see people cycling through. I haven't actually ever counted for a day, but I think probably 3 or 4 people an hour for the majority of the day is pretty accurate.
Okay, are there any more questions? Yes, thank you, Fiona.
Just a question about buses. What's the public transport situation like in Weston, and has it changed in recent years? Maybe because you're reasonably new to the area, you might not know this, but I'd just like to know what opportunities there are for those who might not be able to cycle or walk, to get buses into town and around.
Yeah, thank you. Very important question. I have to say the bus service here is the best bus service I've had anywhere else I've lived in the country. That's not to say it couldn't be improved. My understanding is that there was a bus that went through Southlands, but that had ceased a few years previously, so unrelated to the LTN. There are very frequent buses from the High Street and also from the end of the road. Because of the way that Southlands is built, there are lots of passageways down to the High Street, so you don't actually have to walk to the end and all the way around. I believe the buses in the middle of the day, it's about every 10 to 20 minutes. We're lucky because we live next to the hospital. That's basically, the hospital, love it or hate it, it gives us a good bus service.
Any more questions? June?
Thank you, Meg. You sound as though you're in I might be wrong, quite an ideal position, because you say you're in between the planters. So does this mean that you benefit from both sides, if you see what I mean? Because the division seems to be caused by the planters being along this part of Southlands. Southlands then continues round, and nothing has been changed there, and you're sort of like in the middle. So you sound as though you're in quite a good position. Would you say you benefit from being there?
It's a great question. Benefit in the sense that the children that we don't have can play in front of the house. We obviously have to drive round further because it doesn't matter which way round we go, we can't drive through. Yes, we wouldn't have bought the house if we didn't think that we thought the LTN was a good idea. Swings and roundabouts. we also have to compete for parking, and you have to pick which side you're driving around, because you don't really want to drive all 5 minutes round. But actually, we have always found parking. I think the parking pressures are worse on the Penhill side the closer you get to the IUH, which is one of the many reasons I'm a big advocate for parking permits. But in terms of we don't currently have access to the front of our house, so trust that as everything has its ups and downs. For us, it is overwhelmingly positive, but yes, there are some disadvantages, of course.
Okay, thank you, Meg. So we move on to Peter Hwood.
Thank you. I'm speaking as a resident of the High Street in Weston Village and as the chair of a local community organisation called Future Weston. The idea of restricting the traffic on Southlands was first mentioned in a Future Weston document in 2020, putting a number of ideas to the council for further discussion with local people when budgets were available. The funding for livable neighbourhoods then did become available from national government via WECA, and the Southlands area was selected. We were told that blocking the road was good and would go ahead, partly as it was the only way to get future funding from WECA for more local infrastructure in our area. Last year, Future Weston held a large public meeting to review the results so far. The minutes have been shared with the council. Here is a summary. The long-time problem in Southlands is parking. This is partly due to the proximity of the IUH and their shortage of parking for staff and visitors. Southlands has never been perceived by local residents as a rat run and has never had lots of unwelcome through traffic, so this is not a problem that needed to be solved. The traffic levels were low, it wasn't dangerous for pedestrians, children walked to school down the lower footpath anyway, away from the road, it was a well-connected community, and the problem was parking. The result of the modal filter has been to make parking worse on one side with no effect on the other side. This has unfortunately caused the community to split into two, us and them, the rich end and the poor end. One side overloaded with cars, many from outside the area, parking on the grass, blocking essential traffic worse than ever, less livable. The other side protected with its open green in the middle. When residents on either side have to drive to somewhere in the opposite direction, they have to loop twice along the high street, there and back. So this inevitably does cause more traffic on the high street, more driving, more pollution. It is disingenuous to suggest that the modal filters have somehow in themselves reduced the traffic on the high street. Please realise that cannot be the case. Many children walk to and from school along the high street. I know, I live there. Despite any short-term data to the contrary, the traffic over time has been getting worse. So this is where the potential danger to children has always been, not Southlands. So this has been an interesting experiment, and a lot of hard work and money has gone into it with good intentions, and I appreciate that. But unfortunately, we need to recognise that it hasn't worked. It hasn't solved the existing problem, and it's created new challenges in the community that weren't there before. These challenges now need to be removed. I therefore request the panel to recommend that the decision to make the modal filter permanent be reconsidered. Any suggestion of making it more visually attractive, or changing the turning spaces, or using it to unlock future funding, or needing to prevent reputational damage to the council, as stated in the documentation, completely miss the point. They need to be removed. When the planters are removed, it will remove the problems they've created, bring our community back together again, and we can all start to focus on the real problem, parking. Thank you.
Okay, are there any questions for Peter? Saskia?
Thank you for your statement. How would Future Weston suggest to create safer streets for walking and cycling and playing?
I'm not... if you're talking specifically about Southlands, then I would say that it wasn't a problem in the first place, walking and cycling and playing. I do think that we ought to be looking at restricted parking, but that's not to solve that problem, that's to solve the big problem of parking.
Are there any other questions? Factual questions? You've been very good on the factual questions, by the way. Okay, then we move on to John.
The other speakers have taken much of my speech, so I'm just winging it a little bit, I'm afraid. The first thing, obviously, is it's meant to be a livable neighbourhood, and you can see from the feelings in the back and the speaker behind, it's totally divided. So putting a plant there has created an unlivable neighbourhood, because livable doesn't just mean stopping through traffic. Livable is a wide range of issues, and it seems to have just been focused on sticking a planter in the middle of the road and everybody's happy. Now, my involvement with Southlands is that my mother-in-law lived there for about 40 years. My wife grew up there. So basically, my mother-in-law's 4 children all played safely there. I was trying to do a very quick count. It's something like 15 grandchildren have all played very safely there. It's a very safe road. There's green. There's a park nearby. The pavements are really wide. And then we heard about move the traffic to High Street. That is an absolutely awful road, uneven pavements. My wife is in a wheelchair and can't even get along there because it's so bad. There's no crossing from Eastfield Avenue and no pavement on the Eastfield Avenue side. So your focus is just on the wrong road. You need to stop looking at sort of, children playing in Southlands, which is what they've always done. There's never been a problem. And I suspect if you looked at accidents, it's somewhere close to zero. Now you've got the added bonus of reversing cars, reversing lorries, making it a whole lot unsafer. You've got more traffic on High Street, and then when there's a delivery at the car showroom. So I did see one comment, somebody said, my children don't like crossing Southlands to go to the shops. Well, wait till they get to High Street to cross over. It's just totally the wrong scheme in the wrong place, and if you've caused this much division, it's wrong. It's as simple as that, and it should be reconsidered. And the good residents behind, who seem to have been completely ignored in all this, should be given the chance to speak, and not judged because of what some reports said, but on what they actually say and their real lived experiences. And I think, so it's not me you should be listening to, but these very good people. And I wore this T-shirt especially today, and I'm just going to say, Solidar and Southlands. And if I can just add very quickly, is there any evidence that there was this intimidation of residents or rigging of the vote? Because there doesn't seem to have been much effort for a community-led project. The community seemed to be very low on the list of priority for people to speak on it. 57% against, and it's dismissed glibly. It's dismissed glibly as there was intimidation and there may have been vote rigging. Well, we've seen vote rigging in the past with evidence, and nobody cared, but suddenly it's important. Thank you.
Okay, are there any factual questions for John?
Thank you, John. Do you have a solution, maybe, to...
Just remove the flipping planters, and if you're going to spend money, spend it on High Street, and there's, I can't remember, the road, the steps that lead down and you cross over to Tesco's. Very often I stop there to let people cross, because you've got a bus stop, no crossing. It's just money being thrown at the safest bit of Weston gets the money. It's as simple as that. On High Street, apparently we should be glad that a pointless white line was painted. Well, it served no purpose. High Street is dangerous, Southlands never has been, and I'm sure that if someone would like to actually do the accident statistics, which nobody seems to have bothered with, which I thought would have been quite crucial for this. So...
Right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, I have one. Are you a resident of Southlands?
No, I did state in I'm not a resident, I'm at Holcombe Green, because of the turning at the bottom of Eastfield Avenue is quite blind on the right-hand side, so the increased traffic does actually impact me. Because there's with the clean air zone and Southlands, there's more and more traffic going along High Street, and we get quite a dangerous turn to head left. Or I could run through to the village, but I prefer not to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Fiona.
Am I right in thinking that anybody could submit to speak at this meeting?
Sorry?
Am I right in thinking that anybody could have submitted to speak at this meeting?
Yes, I did feel, though, that in my case I have got enough knowledge. So having been visiting relatives for 40 years, staying there quite regularly, my children stayed with my mother-in-law for a cake, so I did feel I had quite justification in being here.
Thank you. Yes, we didn't stop anyone from speaking. I think this is the point that Fiona's making.
Yes.
It's just the people who apply.
Thank you for not stopping me.
We wouldn't do that. That would be wrong. Okay. Right. If there are no further questions for John, we'll move on to one of the ward councillors, Malcolm Treby.
Thank you. As one of the Western Ward councillors, I'm speaking today to ask that this call-in recommends that the decision to keep the modal filter on Southlands is reversed, at the very least until a solution to the significant problems concerning congestion and safety on the south-eastern end of the road are resolved. If such a solution cannot be found, then the modal filter needs to be removed. Following Southland's original proposal as a livable neighbourhood, consultations took place and ACON produced a report, published in August 2022. On page 14 of this, it asked residents what interventions they'd like on their streets, with parking restrictions, traffic calming, junction narrowing and modal filter all included as options. The outcome of this, page 19 of the same report, was for traffic calming and narrower junctions with raised crossings. A modal filter was not requested. However, and prior to this report being published, the plans for a modal filter were already being progressed, and despite more people objecting to the published plan than fully supporting it, this was implemented in 2022. With the workshop report and this feedback, there was clearly no mandate to do this. Following its installation, 2 further consultation periods were overtaken and results collated. Both showed only minority support, again showing there was no mandate for this intervention. The reports also monitored traffic volumes and pollution on Southlands and the surrounding area, and although increases and decreases of both were recorded, they showed no statistical significance. The only difference that has been made is a reduction of approximately 80 vehicles a day going through Southlands, an average of only a few an hour. The difference in traffic in the local area is therefore obviously minimal, and given the roads at either end carry over 10,000 and 7,000 vehicles a day respectively, no barriers to active travel have been removed. The modal filter has introduced significant issues to the residents though. Congestion at the eastern end of the street has increased significantly, particularly early morning where those seeking parking will come, find none, and then loiter until a space becomes available. This is exacerbated by the small number of parking spaces that have been lost. Delivery vehicles also have difficulty manoeuvring, frequently forced to reverse an extended distance to enable them to turn. It would not be difficult to draw the conclusion that this side of the road must now be less safe than before. Finally, it is with sadness that I note the division this has caused for Southlands. I truly believe that if as a council we had listened to what Southlands residents wanted, we would have looked at traffic calming measures which the street would have united behind as an improvement. Instead we have, both politically and physically, a very split street which will take time to heal. To conclude, this livable neighbourhood is different from the other very successfully delivered livable neighbourhoods on the basis that there are clear negative and safety impacts for one end of the street, no mandate to deliver this from the residents of Southlands, and this has not removed barriers to active travel. A decision therefore needs to make the modal filter permanent cannot be taken, and I urge the panel to return this with a recommendation for removal, at least until a clear solution can be identified.
Thank you. Are there any factual questions for Malcolm? Saskia?
Thank you. How have you as ward councillor supported local residents be heard during the consultation processes?
Yes, so we've gone through and attended the public meetings when there have been public meetings there. We hold a monthly surgery for which people can come along and raise any issues they have in the ward. This is one of the frequent subjects and things come up, and a reasonable volume of emails as well into my mailbox, which I've supported people with. As well, made sure they're aware in terms of what their rights and abilities to speak and influence and things are as well, whether that's positive or negative. And I think that there is a majority which will be against it in Southlands, but it is very split. And I think that's sad. And I would encourage everyone who's spoken here today, whether it's for or against it, to come along and have this say.
Okay, Ian.
You do say that there is a reasonable split in terms of for and against the scheme. During the first consultation period, there were 322 respondents, and clearly the documents here, the evidence says that 71% of those responses were opposed to the scheme. Obviously, being a ward member and knocking on the doors and meeting with residents, is it possible that a lot of those, that 71%, are not actual residents of Southlands? Maybe they have got interests elsewhere in Weston, for example, the RUH, or using the High Street and parking in Southlands.
There were definitely people who responded who wouldn't have been on Southlands, that's true. I think the interesting bit on there is the second report which came through, which had a specific question about whether people were on Southlands there or not, and of those figures, the figure there was 57% against, and that matched very much, I think, the percentages which we got when we went and knocked on doors, and we went and knocked on doors and asked people about it as well, just because we were keen that it wasn't muddied by outside influences, either in favour or against for it, and that second survey is closer to the figures which I recognise.
Okay,
thanks.
Quick question. Firstly, how many people live in Southland, and how many of the residents actually responded? Do you know that? And secondly, what was the consultation done to the community? I mean, am I right in thinking that everybody got a letter, and so therefore there may be a number of people who just basically didn't bother to take part?
Yeah, everyone would have got a letter. Southlands, the numbering scheme on Southlands is interesting, to say the very least. Broadly, there's about 180 houses, I think, and the population, I think, is somewhere around 400. Those figures aren't exact, I wouldn't quote them, but they're that sort of order. But yes, everyone would have got a letter, and yeah, some would have responded and some won't have responded. But yeah, there was specifically a question in there about whether people were or weren't a resident of Southlands. But of course, as well, there were people in High Street, which is the natural road which people would be forced to instead, were also part of the consultation too, and their views need to be counted as well.
Thank you. As ward councillor, would you welcome through traffic restrictions to Weston to support the Journey to Net Zero strategy?
You mean through traffic restrictions, what, on the High Street?
Anywhere in Weston.
I think through traffic restrictions would need to be very carefully thought about. It depends on. I wouldn't be able to answer your question without knowing where you were going from or to. If you meant should people not be able, should people not be able to come along the High Street altogether, then no, I wouldn't be in favour of that.
Okay. Any other questions from panel members? Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you all. Generally to time, so well done for that. Okay, so we move on to the main event in some ways. We have the call-in member, Robin, who is going to speak for a maximum of 10 minutes. I said minimum, that would have been a mistake. A maximum of 10 minutes. And then there will be questions from the panel to Robin. So when you're ready, Robin.
Thank you. Always a mistake to say I can talk for a minimum of 10 minutes, as my family would probably testify. My name's Robin Moss. I'm a councillor at Westfield down in the Somer Valley. I'm leader of the Labour Group, leader of the opposition on Bath and North East Somerset Council. The reason we called this decision in was because it was in a series of 3 decisions that Manda took on traffic schemes, and it was very noticeable that this was a scheme that there was a deal of public opposition compared to the other 2 schemes where there was a majority of public support, and it just seemed to be a real contrast. And it's been interesting since calling the scheme in. First of all, that concerns have been expressed with other schemes in Bath, with similar concerns in terms of making things worse in a community, for want of a better way, rather than better. Also concerns that what was happening was displacement. The traffic is going somewhere, but it's actually going into other neighbourhoods. And I mean, I know you said at the beginning of the meeting, Andy, that this is very specifically about Southlands. I'll try to make sure that when I talk about other issues, that it is relevant to this particular calling. I have to say as well, just comments that what it has created on social media, this calling, is a great deal of heat and not a great deal of light from people on both sides of discussion, and I'll come back to that a bit later. But to be clear, in bringing this calling forward, I'm not against measures to make neighbourhoods cleaner, to make neighbourhoods safer, and to actually encourage people to restrict their car use, rather than using cars all the time. And certainly not against alternatives being put in place to car use. And take it a step further, actually in favour, in principle, with vehicle restrictions in some areas. But, and here's the big but, if you're going to get real change, first of all, you have to have public support to do that. You have to take the public along with you. But also, and I think what's important here, and it's a conversation that Manda and I have had, you actually need to see it in the context of the big picture. That what's missing is what's seeming an overall plan for the whole of Bath, and I'd include North East Somerset as well in that. Many of my residents can't afford to live in Bath, they have to travel in every morning. That's a traffic problem in itself. And I'd suggest that what is needed is a traffic circulation plan for the whole of Bath, which actually looks at North East Somerset as well. Because there are some of the concerns that have been expressed to me are that some more affluent, possibly better connected neighbourhoods are getting traffic restrictions which makes their neighbourhoods nicer in the sense of not so many cars outside, but there is displacement into other areas. That we're actually seeing some neighbourhoods getting more pollution, getting more traffic blight, and the lady who's left, unfortunately, referred to traffic justice. I think she referred to, and I think should be justice across the whole piece. And it is a tough question. How do you, looking at a whole city, reduce the amount of traffic coming in and out of that city so that it is seen as equitable and fair? And what alternatives do you put in place? And I know there's a wider discussion in terms of public transport coming in and out. So I think with the reason for calling in this particular scheme is clearly there is not the public support. There are more people against the scheme than in favour.
Can you stop just for a minute? You're there to observe. You're here to observe. You're not here to create an opinion. So can you please, if this was the House of Commons, they don't allow clapping from the gallery. Can you please refrain from clapping? Thank you.
But to be fair, Chair, I'm not always happy with clapping. It's the booing that I always have problems with, which is which I get more often than not. I think one of the issues with experiments, and I think councillors who've known me for a few years, I always refer to the Department of Unforeseen Consequences. You never actually know until you put a scheme, an experiment in place, what the actual consequences are going to be. And we should be better, nimbler, however we want to put it, at actually spotting earlier on, actually this is a problem. This experiment, if you continue it for 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, is going to continue to be a problem. We need to pull that back. And I think possibly this is an example of that. So There will invariably be unforeseen consequences, and we need the ability to fine-tune. So, a couple of things to Manda. We do need a circulation plan, and we need to look at a circulation plan for the whole of Bath. In this case, I think we probably do need to pull the scheme and reset and have a conversation with the local community about how that can be better. And invariably, when you have a number of schemes, as there are across Bath and North East Somerset, occasionally you're going to get one and you pull it, and actually, good idea in theory, the practice is more complicated, and maybe we need to pull back from that. I also think as well, and one thing I've found with this is that this call-in is that I've had communications from across, well, not across only Bath and North East Somerset, but outside as well. And this is certainly no reflection on local residents. But there are people who are chipping in from well outside on both sides of the argument, who have no interest apart from causing an argument, and are actually making things a deal more difficult. Whether you call them trolls or keyboard cowards, I think there needs to be a way to make sure that local voices can be heard and interested voices can be heard without them feeling that they're being bullied. And I have had people contact me on both sides of the argument who have contacted me directly and said they don't want to contact publicly just simply because that has happened. I mean, I've got fairly thick skin, so being accused of killing children by having this call-in doesn't particularly affect me, although I'd rather not. But I appreciate that for other people trying to have a discussion that's not the case. So in summary, it needs to be a big picture. I think this particular scheme is an example of one that maybe isn't working and needs to be revising, pulled, however, to have that discussion. And the very fact that we're having this discussion and we're having this debate is important. Because if we're going to come up with traffic schemes in Bath or wherever the city is or North East Somerset, that has to involve the change in the way we behave, and that's cars or whatever, then there needs to be public buy-in. And I'm not sure with this one that there is. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. Like I said earlier, I do not appreciate a lot of row from the public gallery, so please tone it down if you don't mind. I really wouldn't want to kick you out. I mean that. Okay, so Manda. Oh, questions. Sorry, questions. How could I forget? Jess.
Thank you. Thanks for setting out your reasons clearly, Robin. I wanted to probe a little bit more the issue around how many people feel one way about the scheme and feel one way about the other. So how confident are you that the majority of people oppose this scheme currently? And I'm saying that with the knowledge that there was a decline in the number of people who took part in the consultation. So the detailed endpoint consultation, which took place after the trial had been in for over a year, I think only 132 people took part, and of that only 75 from Southland, which I think is around a quarter of the adults that live there. So how confident can you be that the majority of people do oppose? Obviously, we've heard some strong views today on both sides of the argument, but I'd be interested to hear kind of what your take is.
The only stats that can be used are the ones that the council have collected within the paperwork, and actually within the decision itself that Manda took. It was identified that I think 70% of respondents were opposed. Manda's shaking her head. I'm sure she'll come back to me in a minute. The problem is with people who've been in touch is it's difficult to filter out those who are actually living in Southlands compared to not. And as I said, some people who are just getting in touch in order to have an argument. I mean, there are some people who across the street to have a fight.
I think you need to make a distinction between the results of that consultation that took place in the first 6 months of the trial and the results from the endpoint consultation. So your call-in refers to the results from that first 6 months, which is where I think the 71% comes from, but actually there was a change over time.
Okay. The statistical note is that at first 71% of people were against, and this is in the Appendix 6 of initial consultation. Clearly, if we were seeing stats coming, I don't know, in a number of different places that are all showing in favour, then this wouldn't be a call-in. But clearly, from not only the stats that have been provided as part of the decision-making process and as part of Baines's numbers, as well as the response to this call-in, there is clearly a real body of opinion against this scheme, and it's not against the scheme not against the principle that you need to make it safer or healthier, but actually that I think unfortunately the gentleman who's gone who answered June's question of what would you do, and he came up with a good list. I think there's a fault in the system whereby an experiment or a trial is put in place without the ability to change or fine-tune as you learn by experience. I appreciate that you don't necessarily agree with all of that, but yeah.
Okay, Saskia?
Thank you. Thank you for setting out your reasons. I note you asked for an overarching review of Bath and North East Somerset traffic schemes, including a circulation plan. Why did you not call for this sooner? Because I think it was the first time that I heard you refer to that.
As a councillor for Westfield and North East Somerset, I've called many times for traffic and transport plans that particularly affect my own patch, if you like. The reason for this particular call-in, it's only been 9 months now that Labour has been the official opposition to the Lib Dem administration. So clearly that is incumbent on us to be looking across the piece. And probably, but Southlands isn't necessarily somewhere I've always looked as a councillor for Westfield. But I do look, and as an opposition we do look at decisions that are made at Cabinet, including single-member decisions. And when one stands out quite as clearly as this, in terms of two schemes, fine, one scheme that's into a level of opposition, felt it was duty bound to call it in.
Okay, Ian?
Thank you, and apologies, Robin, that I've got my back turned on you, no. Okay, I will look at you once I've asked my question and get your answer. You've been in the opposition for 9 months, but I've been a member for this council for 9 months as well, and one thing I've heard from you quite a lot is about unintended consequences. The bigger picture we have with livable neighbourhoods is that this particular site is tied in with all the other ones across the whole district. So do you think that if this was to be scrapped, that there is a risk that we could lose the opportunity to secure wider funding for the whole scheme, whereas perhaps if this scheme was allowed to go ahead and made permanent, that funding could further improve the situation in Southlands and actually maybe change people's minds on whether the scheme is acceptable or not?
Yes. Thank you for that, Ian. Two parts to that. First of all, is an unforeseen consequence if this scheme is pulled that affects funding? And the second is, how does this scheme fit into an overall picture of schemes within Bath? Yes, clearly there is a knock-on effect from traffic management and this scheme to other schemes within the city of Bath. But I think we do need that overall traffic circulation plan so we see the whole of the picture rather than the knock-on effects. And what I say about unforeseen consequences equally applies to me as it does to Manda or to any other scheme. And when I say that we're not nimble enough in putting a trial in place and then continuing it when clearly it's probably not working as well as it should do. How do we do that? How do we make those changes? That applies with any decisions that are taken. Second part of that, and I'm sure this, there has been a concern that if this scheme was pulled, that would that have an effect on other funding for other schemes? And very clearly, I've seen some people on social media saying they are getting in touch with the West of England Combined Authority Mayor, and this is an example of how the whole local neighbourhoods funding should be pulled. I met with Mayor Dan Norris less than a week ago, and this was one thing we had a conversation about. Dan isn't so daft as to imagine that the anti-car trolls are going to pull his overall schemes. He understands, having been in the position that he is and having been a councillor and an MP in the past, that Manda, there are bumps in the road, if not planters, and that those should not affect overall policy. So the two bits are, yes, that we need to look at the big picture, but two, I'm confident that overall funding will not be affected by making changes in the scheme.
Pleased to hear about that, about Mayor Norris, and let's hope the value for money also equates to buses as well on Westmont, but however. I'm just interested, because this is about the core end of this particular scheme. We're not talking wider funding, we're not talking about the wider area. We're talking about, and you raised the issue about 13.7k on planters. I mean, it's a lot for a planter, I agree, but then there's a lot of money spent on the legal things to get there. It seems to me, and I wonder if you agree, that actually that value for money is pretty good, considering it costs nearly 100k to put in a zebra crossing. So I'm not sure how relevant that is to your wider scheme. It's only 13.7k, and I wonder what your thoughts are on that.
At a time we've got a cost of living crisis, if you could give us 13.5k for food bank and food poverty schemes down in, it is comparative.
It's capital. That's capital.
Yes, yeah, and I'm sure it could come with capital as well, but you also did mention that there are revenue implications as well in terms of officer time and the rest. Yes, there is a comparison, whether it's 13,500, 137,000 or 1.3 million. So the element in this of there's clearly public opposition is one thing to pull in, but sometimes when we're in a council that spends tens, hundreds of millions of pounds, you tend to lose sight of 13,500 is actually a fair bit of money and would make difference to communities that are struggling. So the point I've made in some of the information about could be better spent, it could be better spent irrespective of whether or not that amount of money.
Okay. June.
Thank you. I have to be honest, should we really be basing decisions on money when, and it seems to be that we're ignoring the residents who we're supposed to be here to represent? So I don't agree with saying, oh, well, if we don't do this, we won't get some WEC money. I'm sorry, we have to put our residents first, surely. That's the whole point we've been voted in for.
A couple of things, June. I mean, I think the point I was making was that
I'm sorry, I'm not saying you said that. It's a question that's come up from somebody else.
When 76 pence in the pound is being spent on adults and social care, the amount of money left for the rest of the council is so difficult that actually every penny is problematic, is difficult. But I think I hope the point I was making was, although this is it's one of the smaller schemes, I won't say cheap because it's not, that it should be about making sure you spend what money you have wisely, and that involves discussions with local residents to make sure you spend it properly in a way that achieves the results that you want. And maybe what we're losing here slightly is what are we trying to achieve in the local Southlands, but also the bigger picture. And that's why one of the asks, if you like, is about the bigger picture, about the traffic circulation plan for the whole of Bath and how these schemes fit into that.
May I ask another question? The data evidence that's been put forward, in total it was 3 weeks worth, 21 days. Apparently one of the weeks was flawed, so therefore it's only 14 days. Is it right that we make decisions just based basically, by the sounds of it, on only 14 days evidence, and yet we're receiving comments to it to say, with people who've been living with it for over 300 lived experiences? Is that comparable, do you think?
Probably need to ask Manda rather than...
I will.
What I would say...
I wondered if you agreed with me that maybe it isn't quite...
What's very clear with the stats that we have about this scheme is that there are lies, damned lies and statistics. And if I was Manda, I would be looking again at repeating that trial in a way that gives real independent statistics rather than the ones we appear to have where some of those stats are faulty. But I'm sure, like you, Manda will answer that in a bit.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we've come to the end of the questioning of Robin, so relax, Robin, and we move on to Manda. So Manda, you have 10 minutes, so I'm sure you know, so when you're ready.
Thank you, and thank you for letting me speak here today. I do intend to go through the points raised in the call-in, but just to give a bit of context, and I promise, Chair, I won't go on too long about it, I do want to give the outline of the aim of the whole Livable Neighbourhood programme and what it is that we're trying to achieve. The aim of the programme is to create safer, quieter and healthier residential streets, especially where through traffic is an issue. You spoke earlier about you think that we've not been listening or not heard you. We could not have heard clear enough at the start of this process that you were identifying two issues, parking and through traffic. And I completely agree with you that this scheme has not impacted the parking issue at all. It wasn't designed to. What is interesting is even in today's meeting we've had some people saying we really need residence parking zones. I have a lot of people saying we don't need a residence parking zone. So again, there's not going to be an agreement about this. But if you try and judge this scheme on its success, in that if you try and judge it by what impact it's had on parking, it will fail, but it wasn't designed to have an impact on parking. It was designed to have an impact on through traffic, which is one of the bases really for livable neighbourhoods. We also want to create more equitable streets. One of the speakers was talking about the fact that I think the phrase she used was something like traffic. I forgot what the phrase she used is, but what we're trying to do at the basis of all is people need to use roads, whether they're drivers, whether they're cyclists, and whether they're pedestrians. We within the council have an adopted hierarchy where pedestrians are at the top of it, so we try and make it more pleasant, safer and healthier for pedestrians to access their streets. Increasingly, the evidence is clear that spending time outdoors, walking, cycling and interacting with others is good for people's health and well-being. So I hope that gives sort of the context on which we approach Southlands. We have sought the views of residents and we have undertaken considerable consultations in 2020. Anyone who wants to go and look on our website, please do see so because it's very, very well documented. In fact, we provided 6 separate engagement and consultation opportunities to the Southlands community in the Livable Neighbourhood programme. 3 prior to the trial, 2 during the trial, and then 1, the final residents' survey at the end. Very, very quickly going through them. September to October 2020, there was a public consultation on livable neighbourhoods. February to May 2021, the application period for all ward councillors to put forward areas to become livable neighbourhoods. Southlands was suggested as an area by the then ward councillors and was accepted as one of the top 15 by the then cabinet member who had responsibility for this. So once it was accepted and we moved forward, November 2021 to January 2022, we did public engagement. What we tried to do is what measures could improve the area. This included promoting the opportunity to take part in community co-design workshops in the following summer. June to July 2022, a series of co-design workshops for all of them, including Southlands, was conducted. August 2022, the public engagement period on the 3 through traffic restrictions proposals, the other 2 that, as Robin said, he hadn't called in, and the Southlands one. August to September 2022, there were follow-up co-designs exhibitions in all 15 areas to let those attending the design workshops to keep involved with the programme. And then in November 2022, we went forward with these on an experimental traffic regulation order. Just to be clear, Robin, we are as nimble as we can be, but the rules are very clear. They have to run for a minimum of 6 months and a maximum of 18 months. So we can't do anything to change them in those periods of time. That is statutory. And in many ways, I think it makes sense because it does take a certain amount of time for people to get used to changes. 2023, the local elections happened with a strong mandate for delivering livable neighbourhoods. And then in September, October 2023, the residents in all the areas were given a detailed endpoint survey. So, looking specifically at the decision that we made to approve a through traffic restriction, it was noted that the other schemes, including Charlton and Church Street, had a majority, but it's not entirely the case. In fact, it's been misreported and slightly misrepresented today that 71% of residents in Southlands during the trial were against it. That was our public open consultation where we didn't even ask people where they lived. So it's not 71% of the people in Southlands, and it wouldn't be even if the turnout was higher. We have a fixed process that we need to use in order to look at the range of evidence before we make any decisions. These consultations are not yes/no referendums. This does include absolutely the feedback from the residents, and I promise you I have read every single one of the emails and consultation responses that came in. But it also talks about what the wider public say, our traffic and air quality monitoring data, and the council policies and our manifesto commitments. It's not possible in terms of the wider public consultation to say how many people responded from Southlands, but circa 300 letters were sent to properties located in the Southlands and Western High Street, so it's obvious that people outside the immediate area of the trial responded to this survey. We did, however, ask respondents to confirm where they lived in the residents' endpoint survey, which was completed September-October 2023. All these details are in your papers. The reasons people gave for opposing the scheme, such as fears of displacement traffic and worsened air pollution, are not backed by the evidence recorded in our answers. In the 6-month survey of the 220 people who provided comments on why they would object to the scheme, 72 said it would displace traffic and cause congestion elsewhere, 53 said it would increase journey times, and 49 said it would cause more pollution or cause vehicles to travel further. At the endpoint survey of the 87 now, and this is more likely to be Southlands residents, of the 124 respondents, 46 said the scheme increases traffic in other areas, 19 longer to travel by car, 15 said it increases pollution into other areas. However, at the end of the trial, there were people who either expressed that they were completely in favour of it or completely against it. But what they did do, and what I thought was fascinating, and what I do hope we genuinely can work together on, is that a lot of people were mentioning that obviously this had stalled the through traffic issue because traffic can no longer go through Southlands. But what they felt was the more important issue that we need to look at is that of parking. And I've heard that loud and clear again today. What I fear may happen is that the thought of the solution to what that would be for parking, people will have very different opinions on, but more than happy to start that conversation to see what we can do about that. In terms of the monitoring, so it is proportionate, I believe, to pick some weeks and make them separate, and there are weeks that there wasn't, so we didn't go in half-term weeks or school holiday weeks. We picked what should be representational weeks, and it is proportionate to pick and do 2 lots of monitoring in April and in October, so at different times of the year. I think it's fair to say that we haven't seen a significant difference in the roads around. Actually, the high street numbers are slightly down at 2%. However, Anchor Road in one direction is slightly up at 5%. All of this is within what you would consider to be the normal variance and is not significant change. When carrying out the monitoring, we do have to try and balance between cost and risk that something may undermine the data. We do intend to re-monitor again in April 2024, and taking on board what you said, Ms Paddock, about how people use different routes when they're walking, we may well want to look at that as well, because we may well have underreported what the pedestrian traffic is while we're there. Pollution. Levels of nitrogen dioxide remain well below the legal limit and even our own stricter targets. So we are convinced that what we have done is actually helped the pollution in the area, and the surrounding areas has also benefited from it. In terms of increased journey times, I'm going to have to agree. There may well be some journeys that take longer if you're going to need to go around one of the loops. It is our policy that we have to try our best to stop unwanted cut-throughs, and in order to do that, the trade-off will be that there may be some longer routes. One of the things that maybe, and I will take this on board, maybe we've not made clear enough, is that this through traffic trial is just one of several measures planned under the Livable Know-How programme to improve the area. Because it was an experiment, we obviously didn't want to waste a lot of money on doing large engineering works if in fact we were going to take it out at the end of the trial. So again, not only have I heard clearly today, I saw very clearly on the consultation responses when people weren't just focusing on it being a straight yes/no, they were saying this is what could improve it, that we need to do work specifically on the turning circle to make it safer, because that is something that we would want to do absolutely. But also, we're looking at doing better crossings in Weston, especially a ramp linking Southlands to the High Street, which we want to make more accessible for families with pushchairs and people with mobility aids. Okay, sorry, I've got 2 more bits to do. I've also got another 2 minutes to do. I will wait for questions then, and I will use the rest of my 5 minutes. Apologies if you think I've gone over, Chair.
Okay, other questions for Manda? John?
Hi, thank you there. You mentioned the wider public consultation early on in the experimental period and the fact that we didn't ask people where they were from. What was the reason for that? It would seem a fairly sensible proportion to do.
So we thought what we would do is try and get the wider public view and then have the specific one at the end. I think what we would do, were we to do this again, is possibly see if we can try and identify people at all stages, because we have done this in order to stop people from doing cut-throughs, and 50% of the traffic before we started doing this was going from the High Street and using Southlands as a cut-through. Those people will obviously be objecting to this, because what we're doing is taking away the thing that they most wanted to use the road for, but that was the purpose of the scheme. So I think to capture the data at all points, as opposed to just at the specific point at the end, may be something we consider doing next time.
Thank you. How much was ACOM paid for the Southland consultations, and are you happy with the work that they delivered?
I don't have a specific number split out per consultation, and ACOM have been working really closely with us on trying to pull together what are quite new and innovative ways of doing things. I am happy that we have got to the stage where we went to experimental traffic orders, which, remember, is not something we've done very often, and use that as part of the consultation and part of the trial is putting them in. So I think we're all learning together. WACA certainly is learning, as well as our funder, what we can do and how we would, were this programme to carry on going forward, we probably would keep tweaking and amending how we approach it.
Thank you. The key word in this is experimental, and you made a point in your statement that the council needed to deliver value for money in this experiment, and we couldn't throw everything at it. But given that this panel has been asked to decide whether you should continue to go ahead with your decision, or we have to refer it back to you, or even take it to full council, could you make a commitment publicly that if the experimental traffic order goes ahead and becomes permanent, that the council will be able to secure funding for more aesthetically pleasing improvements around there to make the turning head better and more effective, and also to help begin to bring back the community together again, rather than the divide that has been reported this morning?
So I was very interested to hear what Robin said about his conversations with Dan, being in the same party, that they may know, he may know more what Dan's intentions are in terms of funding going forward. I think what I can say is if this doesn't go forward, we absolutely can't do the crossings and the other things that people have asked for within the Western community. And absolutely, if it does go forward, we have to. And in fact, I'd already briefed the engineers to go before the call-in was called in, to go down. There's been suggestions of where someone does a reverse, that we can put a couple of barriers to make it safer for pedestrians and change the turning circle. What is there was an experimental thing done as safely as we could, but not spending as much money. So absolutely, if we make it permanent, then we have to bring everything else together. And I am genuinely saddened that the community has felt split in this way. That absolutely was not the intention. And I think benefit of hindsight, when these were originally looked at, perhaps doing it the other way round and addressing the parking issue before this issue would not have split the community in the same way, though both issues did need to be looked at, and this was the thing that was easier to put in shorter term. And I would be genuinely interested to hear from everybody who's here after this meeting what their views are on the residents' parking zone, because if that's the big issue, and see people already shaking their heads one side and nodding on the other, so we'll have to have that conversation separately. But yes, we do want to bring the and the other bit I think that does bear repeating is that the number of people who have engaged has declined as this goes on, which happens in every single consultation we do, and there are a lot of people who have not expressed an opinion at this stage. So what we are left with is people who feel quite strongly either way. The question that was asked to Robin about how confident could he feel that the majority of people in Southlands are completely against this, the answer is I don't believe he could, and I don't believe I can. I don't believe that we've got that feedback. All we've got is the data that we've currently collected.
Yes?
Thank you. One of the issues that's raised in the call-in that we're looking at today is about residents' concerns about the quality of the consultation. With learning across the Liverpool Neighbourhoods programme, what do you think we can do as a council to improve the quality of consultation and the numbers of people taking part?
So, I think it's fair to say, because we did 6 attempts at engagement, which did include letters being posted through everybody's door, what we've done up till now has involved press releases, social media, physical meetings, letters. The team has gone out and met so many people and assiduously taken their feedback. It is quite difficult, and actually if this committee wanted to take on at some stage a piece of work looking at how we manage to get engagement rates up, that would be good. That's part of the point of us doing this experimental order, in that sometimes the only times people engage is when something is in, and then the consultation can be based on on what they feel and what they see and the data that we can gather from being round it. But in terms of, there was one lady who admitted that she saw the letter but knew it was from the council and she threw it away without reading it. So I don't know what more we can do, because people have got lives. They don't want to be sitting there reading council documents all the time. They want to concentrate on other stuff. And so how we can actually get to a point to say, look, this bit really is quite important and it will impact on you. There is normally a silent majority who don't engage, and it's really quite difficult to get to the bottom of, if people are very, very violently against something, they do tend to engage, so you tend to think that these people are just, they possibly don't think it even makes a difference to their lives, I don't know. But if anyone's got a really good, well, you could make a fortune, you could sell it to every council, if anyone's got a really good idea about how we can get engagement rates up, I'd be all ears.
Thank you. Have you or ACOM considered representative polling? So that is where you don't invite people to respond, but you go out, well, an independent agency would go out to a sample of residents to get their opinions heard, which should then result to a more fair and transparent outcome.
So I think it was something we would look at in the future. Representative polling tends to work the larger groups that you have. Southlands is not a very large community in order to do that, so no, we did not look at doing it for this.
Just a quick question. Do you feel that at this stage of the process the scheme has done what it intended to do?
Absolutely. At this stage of the process, this scheme was put in to stop through traffic going along the Southlands. It has stopped 100% of through traffic going along the Southlands. It did what it was and on the basis of value for money and benefit cost ratio, it scores at 100%.
I'd like to go back to my question about the data collection. You said earlier on that, and I just need it clarified, do you only need 2 or 3 weeks' worth during the trial period to base your decision?
So, as I say, the data is part of the decision and part of the evidence. So, yes, we do it at different times of the year. We never give people advance notice of when the data is being collected, so people can't plan to skew it either one way or the other, and it is representative and proportionate for a scheme of this level to have that much data.
Are the cameras not the way you collect it, or are you doing it other ways?
Cameras, yeah.
Well, people surely will see whether there are cameras there or not.
So after they're put up, people can see them, but they don't get advance notice, so they know that the cameras are coming up for a certain week. So yes, people could then maybe later on in the week decide to alter their behaviour. There is no perfect scheme. The only perfect scheme was if we'd have the. In fact, even that wouldn't be perfect. The only more thorough scheme is if we actually just stopped everybody and said, why are you driving through here? Are you dropping people off? You know, what are the plans?
You could almost have done that, because Southland is not, as you said yourself, it's not a huge scheme. And we're only talking, I think somebody said 180 properties.
Yeah, no, we're talking about car journeys. So we could not stop 10,000 cars going down Western High Street and say, are you doing this because you can't go through?
I'm talking about Southlands, because the reason I'm focusing specifically on that is because, and I quote, the aim of this is to create a safer, healthier environment for those that live on Southlands and encourage more walking, cycling and playing outside.
Yes.
Which I totally agree with. However, I do feel that, or I should be asking you, do you feel that it has achieved this, having heard what the residents say?
So I feel that there is definitely some validity to the points that people are making, that it appears to have worked better, for want of a better word, on one side of the modal filter, the planters, than it has on the other. And I feel that what I've been saying about the next stage is that if this becomes permanent, will that then add to the overall benefit for all? Yes. If I didn't think that on balance this would help it to be safer, healthier and more equitable, I wouldn't have made the decision I did based on all the input I got, including the data, including the evidence, including what people said on the public survey, including what people said on the endpoint survey.
Thank you. May I ask you this as well? Obviously now the traffic can go from Anchor Road, Pen Hill Way, down to the Planters, and then it's stopped, even though Southlands continues down. I don't know if I'm saying the right thing here, but why did it not continue down? Why is it only done like that section and not the rest of Southlands? And also, I've been hearing that traffic now comes down, all different sorts of traffic, so of course it's having, instead of doing one journey, it's actually doing two journeys, because it's having to either turn or reverse to go back along Southlands. So it's not surprising that residents are saying the traffic has increased.
So I don't think that's entirely correct. That there was, 80-odd cars a day who were doing the through journey. So it's not that it's impacting one side completely and not the other side. Cars can get to every house like they could before. It's just what route they use to get there. So there is a difference between a car coming up, parking somewhere, staying there and going back out, or doing the same from the other side. That's not increased. It's just saying that they're not doing the full journey all the way through.
Perhaps I didn't say it correctly. Coming down along where the part of Southlands that's affected to the Planters, any traffic that comes along here, whether it be deliveries, taxis, residents or what have you, they have all got to go back. So it's you have to double those travellings of those vehicles because they're blocked by the Planters to just cut through. So if you've only done apparently 2 weeks worth of evidence, what about all those other weeks when all the traffic really that went along there is doubled because they've got to repeat going back?
I must be being hard of understanding. I'm terribly sorry, Jude. I don't accept the premise of your conversation. So
right, I'm dropping along and I'm going to go to number, 81 or whatever. And then because of the Planters, I've got to go back the same way. That's 2 journeys on one road.
Yeah, but surely it's 2 journeys on one road and no journeys on the other. Whereas if the Planters are there, it goes straight through. So
I'm not disputing that. I'm just picking up on the people that are most affected from one end to the Planters. I'm just trying to find out. No, because they can come up and they can go back, can't they? Okay, maybe I'm a bit funny about this. Sorry.
John and then Saskia.
Yeah, we've had a number of people mention that this has worked better for one part of the community than it has for the other. And I'm a little unclear as to in what way has it worked differently for the two communities, because if a car drives through, that affects everybody equally.
So my understanding, and I'm sure the residents will get in touch with me after this and let me know if I'm wrong, my understanding is that the real issue is that if people are coming in from, I'll call it the top end, it goes back sadly to the parking issue. So in the past they would be coming down and they'd be going down the whole of Southlands looking for somewhere to park, and then they do the loop back round and look for somewhere to park again, where now in effect it's been cut in, so they're doing that little loop more often. I think that's what people are saying is one of the, okay, they're not, I will need to get more, but that's the only sort of, where they're not coming in from the bottom end looking for parking in quite the same way. That to me appears with the difference, and there is a difficulty with the turning circle which we've accepted again and again that we need to change.
Thank you. Why were parking issues not being addressed during the experimental traffic regulation order? Because I guess when Southland was identified as one of the 15 livable neighbourhoods, this was already a known issue, and then I guess it became apparent again with each consultation. It came out again as an issue.
So as these were the first lot that were going through and we were asked to pick 3 small interventions for our first trials, it could not have been something that we would have done a joint thing with the residents' parking zone at the same time. And if you look at the input we got right at the beginning of this, people were almost giving equal weight to speeding through traffic as they were to parking. As we've gone through this, part of the experiment is we learn as well as everybody else. As we've gone through this, it now appears that solving the through traffic problem has been, I believe, has been on balance a good thing, but what will also make a huge difference is if we now address the parking problem as well.
Okay. Yep.
Another question on young people and children. Only one of the endpoint residents said they were under 24 years old. How did you ensure the voices of young people and children were heard, especially for the endpoint survey?
It's a difficult question to ask yet. With all the consultations we do and all the engagement we do, there are normally a certain cohort of people who engage and who respond, and there are people who are traditionally very, very, very difficult to reach. So again, we did try via social media, we did try via press, we did try via physical meetings. So we tried all of the traditional channels, but did not get people to engage in that age group.
Yeah, it was just an additional. Did you engage with the secondary school in particular?
We engaged with the schools, absolutely we did, yeah.
Okay, can I just ask, I think we've finished, I'd just like to ask one question. One of the aims of low traffic neighbourhoods is to reduce the levels of pollution across the area. I'm assuming that in Southlands and the roads involved in this low traffic neighbourhood, the pollution is less. But what about the other roads? Is there evidence that there is more pollution in those other roads or not?
No, so we did the neighbouring roads and they too are within, a couple of them went up 2%, one went down 2%. They're within the normal boundaries that you would expect, absolutely.
Any other questions before we move on to the closing statements, before we have a debate as a panel? Okay, so I cut you off rather rudely, I'm sorry about that, but you have 5 minutes. Okay.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry if I overran. I just want to make about 4 or 5 closing points, and thank you for everyone who's contributed. I've listened very carefully. There was a lot of competition for these initial trials, and the then ward councillors were very, very keen that this was included. It's not, as we've said before, a discussion on any other livable neighbourhood. Neither is this a discussion on the policies that we have adopted, which I'm sure you're all aware revolve around getting car journeys down by 25% overall. It's to look at the points raised in the call-in and on the final single-member decision which I made on the ETRO in Southlands and whether or not to make it permanent. I think I went through all 4 of the points that were made and showed the reasons why I didn't think that it was a valid call-in. The team has assiduously met with and communicated with all the residents throughout this. Unfortunately, it is impossible to accommodate all wishes, as in many cases what's expressed to us by different residents would lead to mutually exclusive actions. But I can absolutely assure this committee that every single decision that has been made has been absolutely in accordance with our policy, absolutely in accordance with the manifesto that we got elected on, and completely in accordance with all our processes. Ultimately, we have limited road space, and we have more demand for it than is currently fulfillable. What we're trying to do is seek to rebalance the allocation to ensure that our adopted hierarchy is reflected, putting pedestrians at the top. Roads are for people, not just cars, and people can all be drivers at some stage, cyclists at some stage, walkers and wheelers. We spent the minimum amount possible on this as it is an experimental order, and I fully accept some of the elements that have come forward that were it to go to be made permanent, we would have to spend money on and to make it better. It was a proof of concept, in effect, and it will have additional work, largely based on the consultation responses. I would urge you to turn down this call-in request. I don't believe that it will achieve what the people here would want it to achieve anyway, and I do believe that we can have a plan working together with the community to bring forward more interventions that will make those who currently are feeling very uncomfortable with this, and I absolutely hear and acknowledge what you're saying, more comfortable over a period of time and show more benefit. But the reasons on which this call-in have been made around value for money it's incredibly good value for money. Around the consultation, 6 different attempts, including letters through every door. Around the data and the collection, I think I've gone through that in enough detail. I think the call-in needs to be rejected. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think a lot has been said. I think most of the issues and the questions have been covered. But I would just make a couple of points. You make the point, Manda, you just made the point that this is about the call-in specifics. It's about the decision that was made at Cabinet that is called in. And while I get that, I actually disagree with you. I think it's a missed opportunity that this call-in has given an opportunity for discussion not only about Southlands but about the bigger picture as well. And I would hope that yourself, the Cabinet, will reflect on this call-in and the issues that have been raised in the wider context of traffic circulation, about traffic management in Bath as a whole. And maybe the problem is, and I appreciate a lot of stuff comes across your desk or in front of on your computer screen. I'd hope you see this as an opportunity to see the woods, not just the trees. I'd hope you look at the bigger picture. And I would come back to the points that I made earlier. And that is, I hope you reconsider this particular decision, but much more importantly, I hope you look at a way, and we can have a conversation about the way that we can see traffic schemes in an overall traffic circulation, traffic management in Bath and North East Somerset as a whole. Thank you.
Okay, so a bit of feedback there. So we move on to the panel to debate. I'm very happy to allow people to speak. Please don't speak forever, because it's getting late. But to say things that you want to say and to make comments that you want to make. So who would like to start? Then we'll rush. John.
I have a number of points. I'll try and be brief. I'm a little surprised that we're talking about a bigger picture. I mean, we are talking about a particular decision, a particular scheme, and the larger context wasn't part of the call-in notice. So I'm inclined, I mean, it might be an interesting point, but I'm inclined to put that to one side. I think a lot of the discussion that we have had has centred on whether the people who have responded represent the wider community. And I think that there is a community that hasn't been discussed, which is the clear majority who haven't felt needed to respond to any of the consultations, to any of the discussions, to participate in any way. And yes, and I understand there are difficulties and there are issues about how to raise the level of engagement. I don't doubt from my own experience knocking on doors, we try hard to engage people, and a lot of people don't feel strongly enough that they feel they need to raise a point, engage, and become part of the discussion. And I think we can presume that that large majority is broadly happy. I'd like to make that point.
Thank you, John. Anybody else want to put in there too, Peneth? Yes, Jeff?
I think I'd like to agree with John, actually, and we've had an interesting, it's been really helpful, actually, to hear the different, very strongly felt views, and to some extent, the Livable Neighbourhoods process is about drawing out what people want for their area, and then, trying to come to some resolution. And I don't doubt that there are very strongly held views amongst different parts of the community. But this point about the levels of participation in consultation, one thing that concerns me with this call-in is that it was based on that data from the first 6 months, and it was not based on the more detailed endpoint consultation feedback. And we have to have this discussion in the knowledge that only a quarter of the residents in Southlands even took part in that detailed consultation. So we have to really weigh up the information we're hearing about how divisive this scheme has been. I don't doubt there are very real issues to be addressed with parking, with the turning circle, and I think it was really helpful to hear from the Cabinet member that these are things that will be looked at to improve the scheme. But there is the basics here of a greater improvement to the area. I feel I've visited it. It's a lovely place to live from what I can see. I've been to both ends of the streets, and I feel like there is the beginnings here of a really good neighbourhood kind of streetscape. So, as I say, I do not doubt there are strongly held feelings, but we have to be aware that we've heard in the consultation from only a quarter of residents, and even today we've heard from only 5 or 6 members of the public. Obviously there are more of you in the public gallery, but still maybe only 10 to 15. So I just really want to remember that context.
Yeah. Following on from John and from Jess, with regards to consultation, I agree. We haven't had maximum participation. The participation we've had is for those people who are fiercely against the scheme, rather than those who are, impartial or even supportive. It's always a difficult thing when you ask a question, are you for or against something? And this wasn't a referendum, it was a survey, and it's the same as applied across the board before the election when we were introducing the residence parking zones, in particular in June in my ward. We did have a lot more opposition, but it went ahead because it was felt it was the right decision to make. So the whole principle behind livable neighbourhoods is that they are intended to make a street safer, quieter and healthier. I don't think anyone would disagree with that, whether against this specific scheme or not. I think we all ought to, be able to have the choice to walk without, fear of having an accident. We want cleaner air, and it is a very valid point about being equitable as well. It is about not having one dominant mode of transport, i.e. the car, and giving people confidence to think about how they travel. Not necessarily just to drive down to Western High Street, but actually to cycle there or to walk there. And the knock-on effect in that respect is it makes people healthier, it tackles the obesity issues that we have. So I think we've all been to site. I went on Friday, admit it was half term. I was there long enough to see a bin lorry on the Pen Hill side, driving right up to the planters. They had to reverse, obviously, but they had an operative who was walking in the street to direct the bin lorry. So it seemed to work, and there were a couple of neighbours, I don't know if they're here today, but I did see a couple of neighbours taking a couple of photographs and sort of, obviously they must have known who I was and pointed out to me. But my view was, if it hadn't been for a taxi being parked on the double yellow lines in the turning head anyway, and dare I say, a Baines vehicle as well, maintenance vehicle, the two manoeuvres I saw from residents turning their cars around would have been much more easier. So I think that does emphasise the fact that we have this temporary experiment in place, and if we are to make it permanent, therefore we don't call in this item, then there will be ability to make further improvements in that turning circle and make the Pen Hill side work just as effectively as it's working on the other side. So, I'll carry on listening to debate, but I would be suggesting that I would be asking that we don't call this in. and that we enable the Cabinet member to make the decision and make this TRO permanent on the premise that we will look at further issues, in particularly, which has been flagged here, the parking, but that's a separate entity. As far as I'm concerned, the livable neighbourhood has worked.
Okay. I'd like everybody to get the opportunity to say their piece. I recognise that you're proposing that we dismiss it, and I'll hold you to that. But I'd like the debate to flag, because I think everybody should have the chance to say something before we get to that stage. So June and then Finn.
Thank you. I feel in a way you're trying to find solutions to resolve this after you've put it in. Does it not make sense, before we definitely agree with it, that it's reviewed to look at the issues that have been raised and to put in some of the helping aspects that you're talking about? Why are we going to do that afterwards? Why we're not doing it beforehand? So I actually wouldn't agree with agreeing with it at the moment. And I would just like to point out that what Ian said about what's going on in mine and his ward, he's quite correct. However, it did have to be held back whilst the big issues that had never been resolved at the beginning. Yeah, I know, but it was mentioned, and I feel I must point. And we did get an extension to sort it out, and that's what I feel we should do here.
Yes, going back to the call-in notice and the actual points raised in the call-in notice, one of them was that the evidence to support the traffic order appears weak. And we've talked a little bit about the collection of data and how much data was collected and was that enough. And I'd just like to make a point that if you collect more data, and you can always collect more data, you're not changing the signal, you're changing the noise. So yes, if we'd spent 4 weeks rather than 2 or 10 weeks, we would have reduced the amount of noise in the data, and that would have allowed us to be more confident in what the data was telling us. But I think looking at the data, it's pretty clear there is not a large amount of traffic displaced onto the high street. There's not a large change in pollution. I think that is clear, even if there's a large amount of noise, because we haven't been able to collect a huge amount of data. And I think we need to distinguish those two aspects of the data.
Thank you, John. Fiona?
Yes, I note that the councillors who have called in, like myself, are not from Bath, like me, are from rural areas, where many of our residents would love to stop rat running. Many of our villages are affected by rat running, and we are calling for 20-mile-an-hour limits and so on. So I think the fact that this has been achieved has been excellent, and that was what it was aiming to do. I think that the next thing about parking, and yes, I too have been there and seen there is an issue with parking, that's the next thing to solve. But if we don't get the money for it, then we can't. And I think that's really crucial. So I would urge us to work very closely with WECA to get the money to solve the problem. And I think that getting rid of 2 planters at 13.5k or whatever it is not going to be a positive thing. I think it's going to be a negative thing. So I would absolutely agree with Ian that we should be dismissing this call-in.
So, on that basis, I'll make you the seconder, if that's okay. Does anybody else want to say anything? Ian?
Yes, just to say, it was June's point about why can't the changes that we've identified happen before the order becomes permanent. I think that does boil down to timing, because the ETO has been in place for 16 months, and there's only another 2 months to go before it has to be rejected or accepted. Yeah. My fear, therefore, on that basis is the funding. This is programmed as part of the wider livable neighbourhoods across the district, and despite the reassurance we've had from Councillor Moss, I would still be worried that if we were to call this in, then we do stand to lose out on further funding from WECA.
Okay, so if there are no more comments, we've had a proposer, which is Ian, and a seconder, which is Fiona. So those in favour of dismissing the call-in, please raise your hands. Those against the call-in? Those against the call-in?
Yeah, let's start polling.
Sorry.
The proposal to dismiss.
Oh, sorry, yes. Those who do not wish to dismiss the call-in, might be a better way to put it. Okay, thank you. Sorry for the confusion. Right, and are there any abstentions? Okay, then the call-in is dismissed. And that's well,